Let's all have a moment of silence for what we just witnessed. Holy mother effing shit. Wow. Welcome to what I'm now calling Fight Nerds episode 14 and a half rather than the rearview mirror. My name is Flyin Brian J. I'm joined once again by Wesley Riddle. We're going to talk about the Ultimate Fighter Season 25 finale, but I feel like we're going to spend a lot of time on the main event. Justin Gaethje and Michael the Menace Johnson put on a fantastic, amazing performance tonight. One of the greatest fights I've ever watched. Wesley, I'm at a loss for words a little bit. Tell me, just give me a couple of words on what you thought about that main event.
To be honest, I don't know what else to really say, but what I can say is that for me personally, out of all the fights I've ever watched in mixed martial arts, from the UFC to the bottom level of the barrel, that right there between Michael Johnson and Justin Gaethje was personally, in my opinion, the greatest mixed martial arts fight of all time. I don't know if you can agree with me in that, but there was just such a high level of determination and will and push for the victory and consistent action and volume that I feel like no fight we've ever seen has matched the pace and the consistency that we saw in that fight.
Well, I don't want to detract from this fight too much, but in my opinion, not the greatest fight of all time. I mean, you got to think about Lawler versus McDonald. I mean, there's more on the line there. Conor versus Nate the second time, there's just more on the line and almost as exciting of a fight. But maybe we could say the most exciting two-round fight I've ever watched in my life. Holy shit. Let's talk about some of the techniques used there. So, first round comes out. Justin Gaethje's dominating the damn thing. Like 30 seconds in, it looked like Michael might have hurt Justin with a left hand, wobbled him a little bit. But then Justin regained his composure immediately, started walking Michael down, leg kick after leg kick, uppercut after uppercut, body shot after body shot. One time, he pulled his head down. We went for like a half of a plum clinch, pulled his head down, fucking flush knee to the face. More of that happened in the first round. Second round comes out. And Michael, at the very end of that round, Michael hurt him, dropped him, wobbled him. He was all over doing the stanky leg, doing the Bambi type of shit, baby deer legs. And Michael's trying to pour it on him. But Justin, he puts his hands over his head and he puts his forehead down so that the straight punches of Michael Johnson can't penetrate his guard and they're landing on his forehead rather than rattling his brain. And he survived the first round, and it comes out the second round. In between rounds, it looked like Michael Johnson was incredibly tired. Seemed like he didn't want too much more of it. Justin, it was hard to believe he could make it into the second round. They come out, Michael hurts him again right away. They push to the fence. Instead of staying at distance and unloading on him, Michael goes in the clinch, and it only takes Justin half a second to regain his composure. They circle back to the front of the center of the cage. Michael's coming forward with his hands over his head again, kicking that leg. He hit Michael with a brutal knee to the, I think Todd Grisham said, the solar plexus. It was kind of the liver area, a little bit to the right of his solar plexus, but looked to take the steam out of him. And then just fucking opened up a can of whoop ass on Michael Johnson. Wes, up until the main event, I was kind of sad that there weren't many ebbs, there weren't many flows in this entire fight card, but there were as many ebbs and flows in the main event as there were in the entire 6 hours before it, right?
I think you nailed it spot on. I mean, I did not really enjoy the card that much. I felt like it was pretty lackluster. I mean, there were some moments the fighters had in certain fights that kind of made it entertaining, but overall, I felt like it was just a pretty dull night up until when we saw Jared Cannonier get that finish. Then it started to pick up a little bit, and those last three fights, and especially the main event that we had, just put a fantastic end to the night.
And a lot of people are agreeing with you, Wes. Stephen Thomas Fuchs, sorry for mispronouncing your name, my friend. He has to disagree with me, agrees with you. All the shots, best fight he's ever seen. You didn't see that damage and almost knockouts in Diaz versus McGregor. Clinton Loughran said, saved by the bell. Michael was almost saved by the bell. Graham Coleman says Gaethje blew that out of the water for a UFC debut. And I was going to lead the show in by saying, did everybody just get a new favorite fighter? Is that your new favorite fighter, Justin Gaethje?
Well, I think I mentioned it on the preamble. Justin Gaethje was a fighter that I've kind of followed a little bit before he was in the UFC back when he was competing in the World Series of Fighting. I don't know if I said it or not, but his first fight with Luis Palomino was actually one of my favorite fights of all time. And then the second fight was pretty much just as good. So I kind of knew Justin Gaethje coming in was going to be a pretty decent contender and a pretty entertaining fighter, and he definitely proved it tonight.
Yeah, proved that he's a contender, proved that he is a... I mean, he was the World Series of Fighting champion, and he comes in here against the number 5 UFC lightweight in the world and kind of put the smackdown on him. And not just with pure brawling. Coming into the fight, myself included, a lot of people think of Justin Gaethje as just this brawler. A kind of technical brawler, but yet a brawler. And he comes in here and he had a solid game plan. He chopped him down with low kicks. He weakened his body. He hit him at the body. His recoverability was incredibly quick, and he showed off a lot of his game tonight. He showed off not only skill, he showed off determination. He showed off some charisma. And wow, what not to love about Justin Gaethje? Speaking of him probably bursting into the top 5 of the UFC's lightweight division, what do you think is next for him? Steven Fuchs, once again, says that he thinks that Conor McGregor is his biggest threat. I don't think Conor McGregor is going to fight him unless he somehow gets the interim lightweight belt, which, I mean, I'm not saying isn't going to happen. So let's leave Conor McGregor out of this. This isn't the time to talk about him. Realistically, what is next for Justin Gaethje?
Well, I feel like there are a bunch of different options because a lot of the fighters up there at the top are pretty competitive and also challenging up there for the best of the division. I feel like Khabib's possibly an option in there, but then again, Khabib, he hasn't really been too active maybe, so maybe we don't want to have him in there. But I feel like 2 good opponent choices for him could be a bout with either Tony Ferguson, just based off the stylistic matchup. And yes, Tony's at the top and he's on such a win streak, but still Tony Ferguson is a fighter who has a pretty similar stylistic comparison to that of Justin Gaethje. And we saw when Lando Venata fought Tony Ferguson that Venata was able to land a decent amount of shots with a lot of pressure, and Justin Gaethje kind of implements a similar game plan. But I think Tony Ferguson might be a good choice, and maybe also a bout with somebody like Edson Barboza. Michael Johnson did already beat Edson Barboza, so kind of if you look at MMA math, Justin Gaethje would possibly beat Barboza, but then again, I mean, that's not true at all. Barboza and Justin Gaethje seem to be 2 of the most entertaining strikers that we have in the division, so that might be a good fight to make.
I'm seeing a lot of comments. People are loving this discussion. Tom Gallagher says Eddie Alvarez. Alfredo Lara says Edson Barboza. Clinton Loughran says Habib the Eagle Nurmagomedov. Some people say Gaethje versus anybody who gives a shit. Just want to see him fight. Barboza's the right call, says Mark Moss. I was going to say Nate Diaz, but he, like Conor McGregor, probably not happening, but motherfucker, that'd be an amazing... Sorry for cursing. I'm so jazzed about what we just watched. It would be an amazing fight, Nate Diaz versus Gaethje. Just thinking of Nate also walks forward with his... I forget what you call it, the bull guard. I think that's what Jack Slack calls it, but similar thing there. They both rip to the body really well. Nate's really susceptible to those leg kicks, though, and Nate is an enormous name. That could headline a pay-per-view after what we just watched. That fight we just watched is going to be on highlights for, I would say years to come, but at least for a while to come, right? I'm liking your Edson Barboza pick, but I'm almost thinking we do Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje for the interim belt. Fuck it. Let's shoot for the moon. The guy came in here from a small promotion, kind of the WSOF. He was thrown to the Wolves, number 5 lightweight in the world, and he passed that test with flying mother effing colors. Why not give him? Because we're talking about an interim fight. If Habib can't make it there, Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, interim belt. I know everybody hates interim belts at the moment. What do you think about an interim belt with Gaethje and El Cucuy?
I think it's definitely possible, especially knowing that Justin Gaethje just beat one of the best lightweights in the world and coming in with a UFC debut. And I mean, he'd already been undefeated, so he already came in with this pretty decent record, already with pretty decent career already kind of established. So, I mean, he's got the abilities to be a world champion someday, and I think that he showed it tonight. So I think maybe pairing him up, even though we've seen Tony Ferguson on this long – I almost said Tony Khabib.
Yeah, no.
Tony Ferguson Tony Ferguson on this long win streak that he's had. I guess he's compiled about 8 wins in a row. I feel like that might be the fight to make, just because they're up there at the top, and they again have similar stylistics, like game plans that they can implement. So I think it would be a great fight.
I've been ignoring Jack Mooney for a minute here. I'm going to mention him in a second, but before I do, I was so excited about the main event there. So excited to talk about it with you, Wes, and the live viewers here on Facebook that I forgot to mention. If you don't want to watch the whole show now, but you're still interested in our takes on the main event and the rest of this card and future takes on we do our pre-fight predictions, pre-fight letter grades, maybe all kinds of content we put out. You can subscribe to the MMA podcast on every single podcast hosting website or feed you can think of. iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iVoodoo, Player FM, Podcast Addict, Player FM, Google Play, all that shit. So please subscribe to us there. That would help us out a lot. Losing some viewers for plugging us. But anyway, Jack Mooney said, okay, guys, let's bring down our expectations a little bit. Let's be a little bit more realistic. And let's throw Justin Gaethje to Kevin Lee. That's not what Jack said. I'm paraphrasing. I'm making up really what he said, but he says, Kevin Lee, both just fought, so the timing would be right. Don't want to give Gaethje a number 1 contender match just yet, surely. Maybe, but what do you think about Kevin Lee versus Justin Gaethje?
I think that makes a lot of sense too, just because they both have a pretty decent way to promote themselves, and I feel like we could see a pretty good clash and a pretty heated rivalry between the two. Plus, with Kevin Lee coming off a win over Michael Chiesa, who I guess is a little bit ranked further down, I think that maybe a fight there actually makes a decent amount of sense, maybe actually more sense. But for me personally, after watching that fight, I think I would like the stylistic matchup to appeal to me more if Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje were to fight each other than Kevin Lee and Justin Gaethje, because that's kind of a wrestler versus striker matchup. And I'm not saying that it would be boring, but I would enjoy a Ferguson-Gaethje kind of stylistic matchup more.
Christopher Flint says we shouldn't say decent anymore. All right, we're going to say spectacular instead of decent. Okay, so I think pretty much we've come to the conclusion that a Justin Gaethje fight versus a sack of beans is going to interest us. No matter who it's against, Justin Gaethje, put him in the main event. I'm going to tune in because that main event was incredible, and I think it was mostly due to Gaethje's fighting style, his tenacity, his forward pressure, all that jazz. So, and whoever they put Justin Gaethje against next, I'm going to tune in. Let's move into Clinton Loughran wants to know our letter grade for the card. And I think we need to be impartial. Despite that main event, the rest of the card wasn't that great. So, Wes, tell me what your letter grade was going into the main event, and then tell me what it was after the main event.
My letter grade going in was a C+, and it kind of relied a lot on the main event and some of the stylistic matchups we saw. Coming out, I'm going to have to give it I'm going to go with C+ as well, and I'll kind of explain why. Pretty much everything up until those top 4 fights were awful. I mean, they weren't terrible, but they weren't great at all, and some of them were just plain, you could have skipped right through them. So for that reason, it brings it down quite a bit. Before the Jared Cannonier and Nick Rourke fight even happened, my letter grade was probably like a D-, because there were just not that many spectacular moments that we had a chance to see, and it was pretty lackluster. The only moment that we really saw was Tisha Torres getting victory in that fight, and which one that you and I missed, so I didn't even see that, and besides that, it was kind of lackluster. But Cannonier, the Jacare close, and Mark Diakiese fight, Jesse Taylor, and then the main event, I feel like brought it up quite a bit, and that main event being one of my favorites now ever that I've ever witnessed in my life had to bring it up to a C+ for me. So just those top kind of 3, 4 alone helped it improve from a D- to a C+, and especially that main event. If it wasn't as good as it was, I'd probably say like a C.
So going into the co-main event, I was definitely giving the fight card a D, because prior to the co-main event, the most impressive performance on the entire card was Tisha Torres. And this isn't a slight at Tisha Torres. I'm not trying to knock her or be a dick to Tisha Torres or anything like that. But if there's a fight card where you say that the most impressive performance on the card was Tisha Torres, that's telling you the fight card wasn't that great. So going into Jesse Taylor versus Diego Lima, I was giving it a D. Then Jesse Taylor he put on a pretty good performance in that fight. We'll talk about in a second. Had some ebbs and flows. And then the main event. Obviously, a lot of us are talking about greatest fight of all time, which I'm still not sold on. But it was.
Can I add to you?
Sure.
I didn't want to interrupt, but can I explain to you why I think it might be one of the greatest of all time?
Yeah, sure.
I think of it this way. I don't like to think of fights. Just if you say the word fight, I don't like to think of names in it too. So I just kind of like to think on the fight as a whole. So, but then if you do think of names, I think of it this way. What if that fight was between a Conor McGregor and a Nate Diaz? Would you say that might be one of the greatest fights of all time? If you just replaced it maybe more with a name. I try to like to stay away from the names and just based off the kind of the fight itself. But then again, I know what you're saying too. There wasn't anything on the line really. There was for a UFC record and for a performance of the night, fight of the night, and their career pretty much in a sense because this was a main event. But then again, I do know what you mean. There wasn't a belt on the line, and it wasn't a title fight in a sense. But for me personally, I just kind of enjoy the fight aspect of it. And as the fight aspect, I felt like it was one of the greatest that we've ever witnessed.
Well, to answer your question, it's for me, it's more than just name value. It's having a storyline. So there was a storyline a little bit. These guys talk some smack. But this is the first time we've ever seen from Justin Gaethje. If, let's say Justin Gaethje goes into his next fight and it's meaningful. It's more meaningful than just making his UFC debut. It's more meaningful than just a litmus test to see where he's at in calibration with the UFC roster. Say he goes into his next fight with, it doesn't have to be necessarily a name, but let's say he goes in there with Kevin Lee. That's not a huge name, but now we know what Justin Gaethje can bring to us at UFC caliber, and he'd probably be favored over Kevin Lee. And let's say that fight were as crackerjack as this fight, I would just rate that fight more. For me, I'm a fight fan who not only do I love what happened in the octagon, but I want there to be a narrative. Tell me a story leading up to it. Half of what's exciting about sports is what's leading up to it. What is on the line? What was on the line tonight? Nothing. The main event and the UFC debut for Justin Gaethje and nothing else. Yeah, the fight. I'm not saying the fight wasn't an A+, getting extra credit. Honor roll, Dean's List type of shit. You got a 4.4 grade point average. But I just feel like, and I'm really reaching here, Wes. So maybe it was the greatest fight of all time, but I still like Lawler versus McDonald more because I looked forward to that fight a lot more. And I also liked, if this fight were to have gone 3 rounds, you know what, Wes? I wanted the fight to go to a 3rd round. I was really pulling for Michael Johnson to make it through, not for him to get the victory, but to see 5 more minutes of that or to see 30 more seconds of that fight. So I'm running around in circles, so maybe you're right.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was just kind of thinking of it that way. That's kind of the way I've always looked at it. But I definitely completely agree with you too. I wish that fight kept going because I felt like even though, let's say you didn't call that the greatest fight of all time and maybe just one of the best 2-round fights you've ever seen, kind of like in the way you put, if it went maybe a round more or 2 more, I feel like it could have increased the value of the fight a little bit more and maybe made it a little bit more meaningful in that aspect. But I do see where you're coming from. But I think I'm a little biased because I've always enjoyed Justin Gaethje, and I've seen some of the best fights that he's ever put on in his career. So coming in and just watching that, for me, that was one of the most spectacular things I've ever witnessed.
Yeah, it definitely was one of the most spectacular things I've ever witnessed. You got a solid point there, Wes. Oh man. Yeah, it was incredible. And think about this. This just hit my brain. So you and I have been doing shows for not that long, honestly. But have we ever talked this long about a main event? Have we ever talked this long about a single fight? We've been friends for 3 years. Have we ever talked this long about a single fight?
I am 100% sure we have not. Just something about this. It was memorable.
It's incredibly memorable. Even if somebody were completely 3 sheets to the wind been drinking, that fight was memorable as all get out. Wow. So since we're back on that, I'm going to give my grade quick, Wes, and then we're going to talk about the main event some more. So going into the co-main event, it was a D. That fight was pretty neat, so we're at a C-. The main event was incredible. fucking incredible. And that's really all I can remember about the card. I can remember other stuff. I'm just exaggerating. But maybe in the end, I give the card a B minus. Gosh darn it! You talked me into a B minus on the entire fight card, Wes. So let's go back and talk about the main event some more. Michael Johnson put on a valiant performance. I think he showed a little bit of lacking fight IQ there. He wasn't attacking the body enough early. He went in for the clinch when he had Justin Gaethje hurt. He closed the distance a couple of times when he had Justin Gaethje hurt. But nonetheless, I feel like he fought valiantly as well as Gaethje. Gaethje obviously gets most of the shine, but it's not like Michael Johnson is just being tossed away like trash here. He looked good tonight too, and I think that he deserves some credit for this being one of the greatest fights of all time. It wasn't just Justin Gaethje out there doing backflips. Michael Johnson deserves some praise as well. What's next for him, and what did you think of his performance?
I love his performance. I think it was pretty even going up until we saw probably the last couple minutes of the fight, just because there were so many, like you say, ebbs and flows that we saw pretty much throughout the entire thing. I liked his performance. He had a lot of moments in the fight, but the biggest thing that you actually talked about on the preamble is that Justin Gaethje recovers very well and very fast. And Michael Johnson, he didn't really capitalize, I feel like, as well as he could have, because I remember the very first time that he rocked Justin Gaethje, he actually clinched and looked for the takedown and tried to land some punches with his right hand, pushing him up against the cage, which is definitely a good plan. But then again, I guess he didn't really think about it too much. You're going up against somebody that recovers very easy, so maybe you should have stayed on the feet and try to land a couple more blows before it led to Justin Gaethje being dropped before you looked for a takedown. But overall, I thought Michael Johnson looked great. I felt like he had a lot of moments on the feet. He didn't really show any holes, but that was the first time that we did see him get finished. But and maybe a little bit in the striking defense wasn't there a full lot. But then again, you're going up against an aggressive fighter in Justin Gaethje, who's going to be consistently in your face throughout the entire fight. So Michael Johnson, again, looked pretty good. I'm taking a look at the rankings. He's currently ranked in the 5th position. I don't think he's actually going to drop. Well, he might drop pretty far, but I don't think he should. I still think he's one of the best lightweights in the world and has a lot of capabilities to become maybe a champion one day if he improves some holes in his game. And the biggest one being his grappling and his wrestling. I think a reasonable fight could maybe be between the Evan Dunham and Gilbert Melendez winner. That's going to happen at some point in probably about a month or two from now. But besides that, maybe Al Iaquinta would be a good option.
Ooh, I love the Al Iaquinta option. But as Jack Mooney in the comments section here says, I think Johnson should take at least 9 months off after that war. That is a phenomenal point, Jack. I usually say that when people get knocked out cold or they catch a lot of brain damage. But even though it was a knee to the body that really started the beginning of the end there, let me check these stats out. These stats are outrageous. Michael Johnson landed 47 significant strikes in the first round and 1 takedown. Justin Gaethje landed 54. In the second round, Michael Johnson landed 49 significant strikes and Justin Gaethje landed 46. In a 10-minute fight, Michael Johnson had, I'm just going to round up to about 100 significant strikes landed on him. And they weren't significant strikes. The definition is clear, but what would look like a significant strike is a little bit muddy in the water, what it exactly is. But Justin Gaethje landed about, 57 power shots on Michael Johnson's face. So he should probably take some time off. I like Jack's idea of making him take 9 months off, but if he were to not take time off or whatever, I don't think that he has fought... Wes, you probably know this. Has he fought Michael Chiesa?
Michael Johnson?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
See, I don't think so either. And if Justin Gaethje is going to fight Kevin Lee, Michael Johnson fights Michael Chiesa. It's just, we split them off. It's the timing of them would be great if Johnson doesn't take a lot of time off, but like Jack says, he should take a lot of time off, and then we'll see him down the road when he recovers. And I think that it might take a little bit of time for Michael Johnson not only to recover from that physically and from the damage that he sustained in that bout, in that war, as some people are saying, but I think it might also take him a little bit of time to recover mentally. He's a guy that fights with a lot of confidence, and I don't know what his mental state will be, but just hear me out. So he hurt Justin Gaethje a couple of times pretty bad, but he couldn't put him away. Will his confidence be a little bit tarnished for his next bout? I think it might. And so he needs a little bit more time off, and maybe we don't just throw him to the Wolves at the top of the division next. I was thinking something like Benyil Dariush. He hasn't fought since March. His knockout to Edson Barbosa, but he too was probably taking about 9 months off to recover his brain. Somebody like James Vick would be a fun fight for him. A lot of options for Michael Johnson. In the end, I hope that he rests up and gets a little better here. Let's see. Dominic DeMonte is saying 24-0 versus 18-0. He wants Habib the Eagle versus Justin Gaethje. I question if Habib can make 155 pounds again. But even if he can, I don't think that's the right fight for Habib. Habib, we've wanted to see the Tony Ferguson fight. If that fight doesn't happen, then I want Ferguson versus somebody like Gaethje. But then Lee versus Habib, I don't know, man. If it's true what Dana White says, which the first rule of being a fight fan is you don't believe Dana White. Rule number 2 of being a fight fan is you don't believe Dana White. But anyway, I'm going to say what Dana White said. He said Conor McGregor wants Habib in Russia after he fights Floyd Mayweather. I don't know. I've said a lot of stuff, Wes. What do you think about any of that?
I guess, if Conor is healthy enough to be able to get in there and fight Habib, I think that would be a good fight to make. But then again, you have to think about the other fighters in the division, such as Tony Ferguson, who I feel like is just as deserving, if not more. And I didn't say that and wouldn't be saying that probably a year ago just because Habib seemed – he was healthy. Tony Ferguson hadn't really beat some of the guys he's beat now. But now we've given Habib numerous chances, and he still hasn't really had a chance because he's continuously got hurt. So maybe we wait for that, but then I guess whatever Conor asks for, you get. So I feel like that could be a decent fight. I was taking a look at the rankings, too, for possible opponents next for Justin Gaethje – or, excuse me, not Justin. We'd already talked about that, but for Michael Johnson. And I guess the one choice that I liked the most was actually the one you suggested. I think Michael Johnson versus James Vick would be reasonable. Because I also thought about this. I looked at Michael Johnson's record. If we were to throw him in there against another top 10 or top 15 guy, and even though Michael Johnson is up there in the top of the division, let's say he were to lose his next fight, he'd be 1-5 in his last 6 Octagon appearances. So that would be a little bit risky to do, and he's still an entertaining fighter, and that one win would be over Dustin Poirier. But then again, 1-5 is not really the best record to have. So maybe about with James Vick seems reasonable, even though I think Vick is ranked in the top 15, actually at the 15th position. Looking down a little bit further, there are some other decent options. Maybe a fight with Jacare Close. I know that may be pushing it, but then again, we have to think Michael Johnson's on a 2-fight losing streak. Jacare Close is a pretty big guy calling out these big names, just beat a pretty big contender and a future star. So that might be a possibility too. Or Mirbek Taisimov, that's another guy. But then again, Michael Johnson just got knocked out. Taisimov has won 4 in a row by knockout. So I'm just spitting out a bunch of options now.
Yeah, man. A lot. I'm saying a lot, guys. Sorry about that. I need to get better at that. A lot of options for Michael Johnson. He is 1-5 in the last 6, as you mentioned. I just learned that because of what you said. He needs to take a step back. I mentioned his confidence. He needs to take a step down, maybe get not a gimme fight, but a more winnable fight for him. He's a fun guy in the division. I'd like to keep him around. I know a lot of people don't like my stance on giving high-profile fighters gimme fights, but I feel like we need to have him take a step back. Sure, he was the number 5 lightweight in the world, but we need to give him a winnable fight coming off of a war like that. He's paid his dues a little bit with that fight, and I think that we give him not necessarily a layup, but somebody maybe not in the top 15. It's time for him to play gatekeeper to the top 15. James Vick is 15, something a little bit lower than that. Let's move into a section of the show that we call our WTF of the night. We usually do this after the most exciting fight of the night, or maybe the co-main event if it's exciting as well. But this is a section of the show where we just say what moment in the night that just made us put our hands on our face and say, what the fuck? So I think that we can all agree on what the number 1 WTF of the card was. Wes, go ahead and tell me what that is.
I'll tell you because I got blocked on Facebook for 3 days, and now I'm not going to be able to get on
No,
until
that's
I
not it.
think what's going to be Monday.
The number one
Oh,
WTF of the card was how insane good the main event was. You know, what
yeah,
the
yeah.
F? That was amazing. But there's some runner-ups, and I'll let you say the first runner-up of the night for WTF of the card.
That was my runner-up. Apparently, the UFC is really picky about who and what is uploaded onto Facebook, so be careful about that in the future. But my WTF that had me absolutely mind blown, which happened, I don't know what fight it was after, but we were just all hanging out, and then there's Todd Grisham talking about some mixed martial arts stuff, and boom, it's Kazushi Sakuraba, or I don't know how else you can pronounce it. I guess Tatsushi Sakurabi. I feel like there are a bunch of different pronunciations you can say just to make fun of Todd, but apparently this guy who seems to know what he's talking about, or at least tries to act like he knows what he's talking about, doesn't even know who Kazushi Sakuraba is. Literally one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time, just inducted in the UFC Hall of Fame, and also just an absolute legend to the sport. And this dude is clueless. And it was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever heard just in commentating in general, and also for mixed martial arts, because that's just kind of a little bit disrespectful in a way.
I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, Wes, and it's not. I'm not trying to knock you at all, but I just want to. So going into the night, of course, the first time I heard Todd Grisham, I was like, oh, fucking great. We got Todd Grisham. And there were a lot of moments tonight where it's like, come on, man. Pull it together, buddy. Stop being a casual fan out there. You're commentating to a bunch of hardcore fans, and you're acting like a casual fan. But at the same time, I think this is the guy's second time ever commentating probably a mixed martial arts event. Do you think that maybe when he just messed that up, so it sounded like he definitely fucked it up at first, but then it seemed like somebody put in his ear the correct pronunciation. He's like, "Oh yeah, Kazushi Sakuraba," and then he got it right. Do you think that the first time was just a flub up, like I just did there, or do you think that he really didn't know who this guy was?
It's hard to say. I feel like maybe he didn't know who he was, but then again, I've always been kind of lenient on the guy. I haven't really hated him or disliked him. I feel like he was doing okay in order to kind of reach out and grasp that kind of casual fan feel, just because he was one himself, as you just mentioned. But I felt like tonight kind of was I don't know what else you can call it. It was rough. I felt like I kind of realized that, well, this guy, I feel like he's just not going to be experienced enough. I don't know how I can really learn from some of the stuff that he's going to do. Because he feels like he's going to be the same kind of monotone in the sense that the rest of his time with the UFC commentating. I don't know how you can really improve besides just learning how to pronounce fighters' names.
Yeah, Dominic DeMonte didn't enjoy him either. Neither did Jack Mooney, and neither did I. But here's my thought. I'm just trying to be positive here. I'm trying to look at it glass half full. The last time I talked smack about Todd Grisham, I got in a little bit of trouble. So this isn't exactly that, but it made me getting in trouble a little bit, made me reflect on my thoughts on it and what I say about them. And I'm just thinking a lot of what Todd Grisham says. So he'll say, let's say Brian Stan will be commentating, and he'll say maybe some complex stuff that maybe a casual fan wouldn't understand. So Grisham, he'll be like, so expand on that, Brian. I'm not exactly picking up what you're putting down. And I can't figure out if it's Grisham who doesn't know, or if he is trying to pull more information from Brian to get Brian to address the casual fans more often. Because like in the Ashley Yoder versus Angela Hill fight, going into the third round, obviously Yoder was doing the best on the ground, but I think it was the second round. Maybe it was the third round. I got some notes here. One sec, Wes. Angela Hill. It was the third round that Hill used the takedown, so that was interesting. But as round number 3 started, Grisham was like, so Brian, do you think it would pay dividends here for Angela Hill to try to keep the fight on the feet? And Brian's like, duh, dumbass. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But then, shortly thereafter, Hill went in for a takedown, and she got that takedown. So what I'm saying is maybe Grisham is just trying to put a spin on the commentating. Because if I didn't know Angela Hill style in that she's normally not good on the ground. She needs to keep the fight on the feet and utilize her Dominic Cruz kind of movement. I might not have known that she needed to, like, at all costs keep the fight on the feet, basically. So maybe, just maybe, Todd Grisham was trying to get Brian Stann to give out some information that would appeal to fans beyond the hardcore clique of fans. What do you think? Do you think any of that's possible, or am I just being too nice to the guy?
I mean, I think it's possible, and we kind of hit it on it too. I feel like he's just trying to reach out and maybe and kind of reach that style of fans that kind of watch it casually. But then again, that's kind of his personality. I feel like he still just doesn't know that much yet about the sport. But I did get quite a bit of moments where I realized that he was just kind of doing the exact same thing that you mentioned, where one fighter's doing one thing and then he kind of questions it. But he almost did it in every single bout. And I'm trying to remember some, but like the Gray Maynard Teruto Ishihara fight. What should Teruto Ishihara do? What should Gray Maynard do? I mean, he's being informative. He's trying to learn a little bit about what's going on in the fight, but I feel like it's a little bit repetitive in the fact that he's asking continuously whatever fight's going on, what should this fighter do? What should this fighter do? When if you kind of think about it and you know a little bit more about the sport, I feel like you can kind of think of it on your own. But then again, I guess he is reaching out in a way to possibly enlighten and just kind of teach some people that are new to the sport exactly what's going on, and letting Brian Stann, who is a pretty intelligent man, kind of learn and explain his side of it and teach them a little bit too.
Yeah, I think of it as like if I was sitting next to my girlfriend. I'm not going to think of telling her exactly what needs to happen at that moment. You know, I'm going to, if she wants me to tell her, I often commentate when I'm sitting by myself. I'll just like say what's happening to try to ingrain it in my brain so I can see it better when I'm watching film, but that's a different story for a different day. But him saying that, maybe she'd be like, oh, okay, so that girl needs to keep it on the feet and whatnot. I don't know. Actually, my girlfriend is pretty intelligent about watching fights. She's watched them with me many a time, so that's not a good example. But you see what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, no, I did not like Todd Grisham, but let's give him a chance. Let's be a little nicer to him. We're still in the section of WTF of the card. My second WTF of the card for runner-up, and I've got two more. This one is going to Jacare Close. He and Mark Diakiese had a rather close fight. The first round I thought was clearly Jacare Close. The second round was clearly Jacare Close. Third round I thought was clearly Mark Diakiese. So Jacare Close won a split decision, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. And then immediately after, he like threw a tantrum. He was yelling and screaming and like trying to get at Mark Diakiese to fight more or something. And my WTF goes to Jacare Close for, what the F, man? I realize Mark Diakiese talked smack to you at a fighters meeting, a rule meeting. Mark Diakiese apparently told Jacare Close he was going to knock him out. It's a fucking fight. Of course he's going to try to knock you out, dumbass. I get you're mad that he said that to you in person. Okay, great. But as soon as the fight is over, let's show some respect and let's act like we're adults here. We're not toddlers who need to be held back because some kid stole our toy. I just thought that was a what the F moment for Jacare Close to act like that in the cage and then to show a complete unclassy moment. I realize we're talking about fist fighting in a cage, but occasionally we can show some class. So my next WTF goes to Jacare Close. Did you see this? What did you think of it, Wes?
I did see it, and for me personally, I'm not a fan of, first off, that kind of attitude. I just feel like it was really necessary, or not necessarily appropriate, especially coming off a win like that. I do understand the fact that they had some disagreements coming into the fight, but there's a time and a place for when he can act like that. But I can't recall many fighters ever kind of having that kind of hothead personality, kind of, I told you I was going to beat you, blah, 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 so forth, so forth. I think it's in a sport like mixed martial arts that there is a lot of times where you're going to learn about yourself and learn about other people. And coming off of fights like that, I think you need to show a more humble side. I feel like mixed martial arts is a humble sport. I feel like that's the way you should act. And I think that you should, no matter kind of what beef or what kind of disagreements you may have with one another, I think no matter what happens inside of the cage, it stays inside the cage. And kind of just what we saw, I felt like maybe there should have been a little bit more sportsmanship, a little bit more humbleness from Jacare Close. I feel like he was a little bit just over, I don't know what the right word is, maybe overconfident in a way. Just, I didn't like it. I'm not a fan of that personality. I felt like it just wasn't really uncalled for. I may have just rambled a little bit too much, but that's kind of my take on it. I'm not really sure if you agree with me, but I just did not really like it too much.
Yeah, man. After you win a fight against a man, your job is not to call him out again. Your job is really over. But if you want to excel at your job, your next job is to call out your next opponent, not to keep talking trash to your last one. You beat that guy already. Turn your focus to your next opponent. Call out somebody else, and that would be better for your career. But at the same time, he probably just became the villain, and now a lot of us want to see him lose in his next fight. Quickly, the official post-fight bonuses are in. WME IMG assigned Fight of the Night, of course, to Justin Gaethje versus Michael Johnson. Performance of the Night goes to Tecia Torres. And the last performance of the night goes to Justin Gaethje. So he made his UFC debut. He won via TKO in round number 2. He gets an extra 50 Gs for Fight of the Night and another extra 50 Gs for performance bonus. So, holy shit, Justin Gaethje had a really big coming out party tonight. Last WTF of the card, and this will be a short one, fight fans. Between round 1 and 2, Marcel Fortuna picked him up like he was, I don't know the act, like it was Dirty Dancing. You know the scene in Dirty Dancing where the girl runs and jumps and he picks her up in the air? Marcel Fortuna's coach picked him up like that in between rounds 1 and 2. What the fuck? Did you see it?
I actually missed that, but that's kind of funny.
I tweeted it. Maybe I'll get in trouble for tweeting it. I tweeted a little a gif or a gif of it. It's just like, I don't know what the fuck they were doing. So Marcel's just walking to his corner, and as he's walking there, his coach just picks him up under the armpits over his head and shakes him real quick. It's like, I don't know what the point of that was. But let's talk about some of these other fights here. So Jesse Taylor defeated Diego Lima, submission rear naked choke in round number 2. Jesse Taylor came out first round, and he did what you expected him to do. Went right in for the takedown, got Diego down, won a 10-9 round number 1, where Diego Lima landed, I believe, 2 strikes in the first round. Yippee-ki-yay, homeboy. Then, second round comes out, and at the very beginning, they get into a little exchange, and Diego Lima lands one of his 2 strikes in the second round. It was a wide left hook that dropped Jesse Taylor, but then Lima goes in to get in top position. Taylor regains his composure almost as quickly as Justin Gaethje would, snatched the leg, went in for the takedown, took Diego Lima's back, and shortly thereafter, Jesse Taylor had a rear naked choke victory. And Wes, that was Diego Lima's first submission loss, is that right?
I'm pretty sure. I'm taking a look at it now, and I felt like a lot of the losses come by knockout, and you're 100% right. Out of his losses, he's got 4 by knockout and 1 by decision, and that was the first by submission.
So how impressed were you with Jesse Taylor's performance? Oh, quickly, I wanted to read something. I ruined the article already. So this was the redemption season of The Ultimate Fighter. Jesse Taylor was on season 7, and he was kicked off before he could make it to the finals, I think, or maybe it was the semifinals, because he got really drunk. He broke a window out of a limousine, and he was harassing some women at a casino. So Dana White kicked him off that season of The Ultimate Fighter. That's why he was being redeemed here. And Diego Lima had lost season, I don't even know what, via knockout to Eddie Truck Gordon. So how crazy is that? Diego Lima has now got second place on 2 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. Wow, that sure is a feather in his cap. But were you impressed with Jesse Taylor's performance tonight?
I actually missed the fight, but I did see parts of it that kind of made up for it. And it was pretty much, I guess, the way that we expected. I felt like it could have gone 2 ways. I thought that Lima had his best chance if he was going to be able to keep it on the feet. But I think, if I'm not right, feel free to correct me, but didn't Jesse Taylor wobble Diego Lima before he scored the takedown and then sunk in the rear naked choke?
No, opposite. Uh, Lima hit a left hook on Taylor that dropped him. And then Lima went in for some ground and pound or something, and Jesse Taylor snatched a single leg takedown, took his back.
I do recall kind of watching that happen. I thought it was the other way. That's my bad. I think that it was pretty impressive. I thought that Diego, again, his best chance was going to be able to keep it on the feet and look for strikes, or possibly look for a guillotine with Jesse shooting in for a takedown, because Jesse Taylor's biggest weakness are the guillotine chokes and also his submission defense, but Jesse Taylor's great at his submission offense. I did think that when I saw the finish that Jesse Taylor was deserving of a performance of the night bonus, but then I kind of rethought about it and I tweeted it out, not this part, but kind of thinking about it, Jesse Taylor actually won, I guess, the show money, which was $250,000. So we already made off pretty well. I feel like Teacher was kind of deserving of that too, getting her first ever finish in her mixed martial arts career, both amateur and professionally. So, but either way, impressive from Jesse Taylor. Unfortunate for Diego Lima because he's only got one victory, and now he's 1-4 in his UFC fights, not counting the time that he had off, and all of his losses in the UFC have come by a stoppage. So unfortunate for him, but good for Jesse Taylor. He was able to get a victory after making some mistakes on the season he was in, season 7 of The Ultimate Fighter. So props to Jesse, man. He's had some losses here and there, but I feel like he's finally got his game together. I feel like he's got his attitude in the right place, and I think Jesse Taylor could maybe make some noise in the division.
I think it was $290,000 that Jesse Taylor got. But speaking of making noise in the division, I've got a few options that I think could be good for Jesse Taylor in his next fight. My initial reaction was give him to Tim Means. I feel like Jesse Taylor has some high-level wrestling. It's going to take a significant person to be able to ward that off. And while Tim Means doesn't have great takedown defense, he has a big name, and I don't know if he could deal with the takedowns of Jesse Taylor. So there's one option. Option number 2 would be Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Cowboy obviously has some long Muay Thai striking, but also has some pretty good wrestling. So there's that. But the more likely options are... Well, the most likely option, I think, is Killa B. Ben Saunders, if he's still in the UFC at the time, Alex the Dominican Nightmare Garcia, and the last option that I wanted to give for funsies would be Zach Cummings. And the reason why I say this is for funsies is because who did he beat on The Ultimate Fighter to make it to the main event here, or the co-main event, the finale, the final? James Krause, who's a teammate of James Krause, but actually fights at welterweight, not just on The Ultimate Fighter. Zach Cummins. I think that'd be fun. What do you think of all those options? Who would you rather give him?
I like all of them. I'm not really sure if I have a favorite, but they all stand out to me. I feel like they're all viable options. I pulled up the rankings too, and I was kind of looking with you and seeing some of the fighters, and I pretty much agree with everything you said. I think what I see, Ryan LaFleur and Alex Cowboy Oliveira have a fight scheduled for July 2nd, so in a couple weeks from now. So maybe that won't be a possible option, but then again, it could. Maybe they'll get the winner of that fight. The Tim Means is definitely an option, having just beat Alex Garcia and fresh off a victory. Now, Jesse Taylor fresh off a victory. The other name that you said was Zach Cummings. Zach Cummings is on a 2-fight win streak, 2-fight finishing streak over 2 guys with submission. Jesse Taylor, a submission specialist, so that could be pretty good. Another fighter I saw, I'll throw out one more that I saw. I saw Yancy Medeiros. I thought Yancy Medeiros versus Jesse Taylor could be a decent fight as well.
Yeah, I like all that. I mean, there's a lot of options for Jesse Taylor here, and I don't think he's going to get a top 15 opponent, but I want to see him against somebody who has just a freckle of takedown defense. Not crazy good takedown defense. Don't get me wrong. I still want to see, if he can. I want to inch him up in the level of takedown defense. So Lima, not great takedown defense. Let's say Lima has a 6 in takedown defense. Let's give him an 8 and move him up. Just little by little. But anyway, impressive performance by Jesse Taylor. We already kind of talked about Jacare Close versus Mark Diakaze, but let's mention it here again. Jacare Close basically won by forward pressure, fundamental striking, and low kicks. A shitload of low kicks, rolling when Mark Diakaze would go for his one-strike finishes. And So Mark Diakiese, he's very fun to watch. He's very flashy, but we've seen time and time again that fundamentals kills flashiness at the highest levels when the flashiness doesn't also have fundamentals, and that's basically what Jacare Close did here. Were you impressed with Jacare Close's performance, or was it just kind of like shining a light on Mark Diakiese, like, okay. So he's like a Michael Venom Page. If you put fundamentals on this guy, he's going to crumble.
I think with kind of what I said earlier about Jacare Close, with that aside, I feel like there's some good and some bad to it. I feel like Jacare Close is a pretty decent fighter. Yes, he just did beat Mark Diakiese, who was 12-0, who did have quite a bit of knockouts on his record. And now Jacare Close is still undefeated. He had a pretty good performance. He mixed in quite a variety of strikes that were able to confuse Diakiese throughout that. But I felt like at times we saw Diakiese make more IQ mistakes, which cost Diakiese the fight more than Jacare Close looking fantastic. I mean, they both did look good in their performances, but Diakiese made some careless mistakes that I felt like cost him the fight, not just including the times that he wasn't really checking the leg kicks or trying to move his feet out or trying to switch up his stance, which he did sometimes, but not really in the times that he needed to. I felt like Diakiese was just kind of throwing a little bit looping shots, some wild kicks here and there. I felt like he was just kind of a style. I'm trying to find a guy to compare him to, but in a way, like you said, to Michael Page, he's just looking for that one shot, the one big shot, and that's pretty much it. Then he kind of calms down, relaxes somewhat, and I feel like that's kind of what he did in this fight. He looked for takedowns here and there, but wasn't able to get them. A couple times he threw a spinning kick, and it didn't really work, and Close was able to capitalize on that, grab him, and pull him down to the mat. So maybe a little bit more on Diakiese for making some IQ mistakes, but nevertheless still a fantastic performance from Close.
I think that what's next for Close should be Damir Hadzovic, the guy who just knocked out Marcin Held. They are on similar time frames. It was May 28th that Hadzovic knocked out Marcin Held in the third round there. And I think that'd be an interesting bout. They're both, physically strong, kind of young dudes. I like it. I feel like that's a decent matchup. Or perhaps the James Krause versus Jacare Close. What do you think about either of those?
I like both of them, and I actually tossed this option out. And I don't know if you're going to agree with me, but I'll see if you do. I actually posted it on Twitter a little bit ago. But I thought it kind of makes sense, and I'm not really sure, though. But I thought maybe Michael Johnson versus Jacare Close. If you think about it in this way, Johnson did take a beating in that fight, and he definitely may need some time off. But then again, we could say the same thing for Justin Gaethje because he took quite a bit of damage as well. But as I mentioned earlier, Michael Johnson, he's won in what I believe is 4 in his last fights. Let's say you tossed him in there again with a guy that's in the top 10, top 15. If Michael Johnson loses, then he's 1-5, and that one win came in for Poirier, but then again, that's still 1-5 in your last 6 fights, which doesn't really sound that good. Maybe Michael Johnson, Jacare Close, if you think about the two. Now you have if you took an undefeated coming up guy who has a pretty hot head and put him against a guy who's 1-4, pretty hot head, I feel like they should just bang. And I feel like if they bang, they're going to want to go out there and try to capitalize on the moment. And I think it can make for a good rivalry. I feel like we could see some more trash talk and Jacare trying to edge his way up there to the top.
I have to poo-poo on you, Wes. I don't think that's a viable option. Jacare Close said in his post-fight that he wants a fight sooner. He thought it was too long between his fight with Devin Powell and now, and we've been mentioning how Michael Johnson should probably take time off after that war. Jack Mooney suggests Daryl Horcher versus Close because they're on similar time frames, and they both have a win over Devin Powell. So, yeah, that's an option as well. I'm going to throw one more option out. I don't want to spend too much time on matchmaking here or dwelling on that type of thing, but Groovy Lando Venata, for the simple reason that it's another guy who has a lot of flash, a lot of pizzazz, but not that much fundamentally sound striking ability. He has some wrestling, so he could contend with Jacare Close there, but the striking, Close is going to walk forward, and Groovy needs space to get off those goofy kicks. I just think stylistically that'd be a fun match. Test Lando's wrestling versus Jacare Close's, and then see if Lando's flashy striking could hold up against the solid fundamental forward pressure of Jacare close. But anyway, let's move on to Jared Cannonier versus Nick Roerich. A lot of this fight comes down to, I was surprised Roerich could last to the third round. At 2 minutes and 8 seconds is where Jared Cannonier TKO'd him. Cannonier was basically lighting him up on the feet. Cannonier was turning his back and running a few times like Alistair Overeem does lately. He was dropping his hands. He was showing little respect for Roerich's punches, but actually Roerich was outlanding him. It's just that Cannonier was landing the bigger punches. I think we all expected Cannonier to show out here, and that's why the TKO wasn't that exciting for us. But Nick showed that he has really good cardio for coming in here on like 4 days short notice. His body looks kind of dad bod-like, but he had some solid output, some solid forward pressure. There were some things to like from him. I think that he's a decent addition to the lower ranks of the light heavyweight division. But I didn't get to see what I wanted to see from Jared Cannonier. I wanted to see him take a step up. I wanted to see him move toward some more competitive fights. We didn't get to see that tonight. Any takeaways, Wes?
Nothing really too much else I can add. I mean, it was still an impressive performance from Cannonier, and I feel like he's not going to gain a whole lot of value from this fight. But then again, it was still a good performance, a pretty dominant performance, and a victory on his record. And he was able to get the finish. Nick Roerich showed a lot of toughness and durability in that fight. I think Jared Cannonier has all the capabilities of being a great athlete and maybe someday being a top contender in the light heavyweight division, but he still has a lot of improvements he has to make. The biggest one being his clinch game and also his wrestling defense. It's just not really there yet. But I feel like maybe working with some of these lower levels instead of pushing him like they did in the last fight against Glover might be a better choice for him. So maybe give him somebody outside of the top 15. For Nick Roerich, maybe probably do what they initially had planned and maybe throw him in a month or more than a month, but probably, let's say, later down the road, 4 or 5 months from now, put him on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, give him what he initially had. You could keep him around the UFC, but I feel like maybe kind of working his way in a little bit more because he did take a pretty decent beating tonight. But Cannonier looked pretty good overall. A decent performance against a guy who was a newcomer and undefeated.
I personally think what's next for Rick Roerich would be to fight somebody who's debuting in the light heavyweight division. You can't really send him back to a league that's to get into the UFC once he's already in. So we just have him be the gatekeeper for the person who's coming into the UFC. That's my personal opinion. Next thing I want to mention, Wes, is how about the lack of calling out your next opponent tonight? So Gaethje, Brian Stan gave him the mic and was like, so you're calling out somebody, you want to give us a specific name, call someone out, here's your time, and nothing? Okay, great. Jared Cannonier says, anyone can get it. You can get it in your backyard, my backyard, his backyard, her backyard. We're all backyards. Anybody's backyard. And Brian Stan was like, come on, say a name, bro. Say a name. And he refused to say a name. What was up with Jordan Johnson, who defeated Marcel Fortuna via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board? He just said, I just want a USA champ. Peace out, y'all. What a waste of their mic time, right? So early on in the night, not only were the fights kind of boring, but nobody utilized their mic time either.
I agree. There weren't a lot of finishes, though, to kind of go off of that. So we didn't get really a chance, like you said, to see a lot of mic time. The only call-out that we actually did see, I don't know if you did hear it, but Jared Cannonier called out Gokhan Saki, is and to be honest, that could actually make quite a bit of sense just because Gokhan is now coming into the UFC, and we already know that he's one of the most prestigious kickboxers to ever pretty much step foot inside. And Gokhan had quite a prestigious career, so I feel like maybe – I don't know if he's ever fought in mixed martial arts. I think he had one fight quite a long time ago, but maybe Saki versus Cannonier makes sense. Two strikers. Gokhan just having already beat quite a bit of competition in his kickboxing days. I think that would actually probably be a good fight. But then going away from that, there weren't a lot of people taking advantage on the mic. Justin Gaethje didn't really have a chance to call anybody out. When I remember Jordan Johnson, the first thing he said, Brian Stan starts talking to him, asking him a question like, how did you think about this fight, man? Like, it was a great performance, pretty well-rounded. And the first thing he says is, what up? And that's all he says. and it's just kind of awkward because it's like, well, are you going to answer this question or not? So I do agree with you. I don't want to ramble too much on about it, but no fighter that really won tonight, besides I guess Jared Cannonier, took advantage how they could have and how they should have on the mic.
I'm not going to pretend to know anything about Gokhan Saki, the kickboxer. I don't know anything about sports outside of mixed martial arts, so I'm not going to pretend to know it, but I will watch it. I like Jared Cannonier. So the rest of these fights, there's not a shitload to talk about. And speaking of using our mic time, we've been using a lot of mic time. We've been on the air for quite a while now, I believe. Let's just run through some results, and then you tell me if there's anything you want to touch on. Brad Tavares defeated Elias Theodoro, unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. I already mentioned Jordan Johnson defeated Marcel Fortuna, 29-28 across the board. Angela Hill defeated Ashley Yoder via 30-27 across the board. James Krause defeated Tom Galicchio via 30-27 across the board. CB Dalloway beat Ed Herman 29-28, 27-20. 29-28, 29-27, 29-27. Tisha Torres defeated Juliana Lima, submission rear naked choke at 53 seconds of round number 2. Featherweight fight was the curtain jerker on the Fight Pass prelims with Gray Maynard and Teruto Ishihara, and Gray Maynard just wrestled Teruto for 3 rounds, winning 30-26 across the board. And Stan Jasinski says that Gaethje called out Tony Elkukui Ferguson in the post-fight show. So that's what we were saying. And when we were talking about Gaethje a lot, and Stan says that Barbosa can fight Conor for the belt and he'll take Ferguson. I don't know about that, Gaethje, but so maybe that'd be something we could talk about now or another day. What do you think? I don't know. These are our first impressions. Gaethje evidently called out Ferguson and said Conor versus Barbosa would be fine and he'll take Ferguson. He said this in his at the post-fight press conference. Any thoughts?
It's weird because what makes the most sense and what should happen is El Kukui should get Conor, but Conor wants Khabib, but Justin Gaethje wants Barboza to fight Conor and him to fight Ferguson. So that leaves Khabib out. So Khabib fights Kevin Lee. I don't really know. Habib. I feel like there's just a bunch of Habib. I know you get on me for that, and you get on everybody. I apologize. But I feel like there's just a mess right now. I don't really know. I feel like there are a bunch of different options you can do, but what I want is to see Justin Gaethje fight El Kukui. I think that would be one of the most exciting fights that we could possibly see in the lightweight division.
And in my personal opinion, I would watch Justin Gaethje fight a brown paper bag because the guy brings the excitement to the event. I will watch him do whatever he wants to do. Backflips off the cage, fight Brad Tavares. I don't care. I'm going to watch Justin Gaethje fight no matter who he's scheduled against in his next fight. Anyway, Wes, I think it's probably time for us to get out of here. Tell the fight fans where they can find you, where they can read your work.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on. Appreciate it. Always doing these breakdowns and chatting mixed martial arts. Feel free to give me a follow on Twitter at AllThatMMA. That's where I do a lot of my communication with you all out there. I'm going to try to get a matchmaking article out at some point for this fight card, and then also 213, which is going to go down technically for me and you today. UFC 213, Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko. That's over at MMAsucker.com. And then again, my Twitter is AllThatMMA. Feel free to give me a follow over there. But thanks again for having me on, and feel free to tell them where you are.
Hey, Wes, putting you on the spot here. Do you want to do the preamble with me tomorrow for 213?
I unfortunately can't tomorrow just because I have to work.
You have to freaking work. Okay, well, fight fans, I will be here tomorrow an hour before the Fight Pass prelims, which start at... One sec. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so the Fight Pass prelims start tomorrow for UFC 213 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That means I will be here, right here, at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to do the MMA preamble, where I will go over my picks for UFC 213. You can follow me on Twitter at Flyin Brian J. Please like my Facebook page. It is above you here if you're live on the Facebook page, or if you're not, just go to facebook.flyinbrianj. flyin.com, and like me there. I would really appreciate it. And if you're not already subscribed to our podcast feed, please do that as well. And if you can, I know I'm asking a lot of you guys, please give us a rating on whatever podcast feed you're listening to, iTunes, SoundCloud, whatever it is. Give us a rating, 1 to 5. I don't care. Just rate us and tell us why you gave us that rating. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the fights. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys later. Namaste.